Hello, and welcome to episode 146 of the Book Binge, yet another top 10 ranking video, but this time we're doing things yet again a little bit differently, but we're covering, several read-alongs that I wanted to join in the past. I think most of these are 2023, actually a couple of them are 2022, so, a couple read-alongs that I wanted to join over the last couple of years, but did not have time to do so. Books that I hope to get to in the near future, a couple of them I already have immediate plans for. One in particular I have immediate plans for, but we'll get to all of that over the course of the video. Also, I am technically cheating just a little bit for this list because half of these I technically never planned to actually join for at the time that the read-alongs happened, but they were ones that I considered for a little bit, just like, yeah, I would like to join that. I don't have time for it, so I'm not going to. And that was basically the end of my consideration. Whereas a couple of these other ones I actually really wanted to join, but just could not carve out the time to be able to do. So, we're going to talk about all of that today. Finally, there's not really any set order to this list. In fact, I actually organized them in between 5 series and 5 standalones. So going between a series standalone, etc. Just to kind of vary things up just a little bit. But there's a couple of these that you could technically rank in the order that they're at, but for the most part this is a more or less free list, and for once there's no honorable mentions, so let's just jump straight into number 10, which is a series that I do not own yet. I didn't realize this until I actually came to gather the books for this video. The first series is going to be The Expanse, so I'll just show the store listing on the Kindle for the first book of that. This one comes as a recommendation from, a few friends, but most particularly Jonathan, Words of Time. If you know his channel, I recommend it. It's easily my favorite sci-fi focused BookTube channel on the platform. It's a lengthy series, no plans to get to it immediately soon, especially while I'm in the middle of doing a lot of work for Sun Eater related projects, but it is a space opera series that I want to read, probably my first space opera series I'm going to try after I'm done doing a lot of the work that I have to do for Sun Eater over the next year or two. So we'll see when this series is able to happen, but it is one that I want to read nonetheless. Next on this list is one that's going to make a particular friend of mine, Reen, very happy to see. That is a personal favorite of his, House of Leaves by Mark, is that Danielewski? That might be how it's pronounced. I might have just butchered that pronunciation. I apologize. This is, this book is infamous for many reasons. It's one that I'm then convinced by Reen that it isn't actually that difficult, that it's more just, taking a little bit of time to actually work through it. But I mean, there's just as many pages with like one word on them as there are pages with way too many words on them, and like, pages like this where the print is all over the place. It's just kind of goofy, one of those books. There's been about half a dozen read-alongs for this book, attempted, that's not the right word, attempted read-alongs and buddy reads amongst my friend group over a couple of different servers over the last couple of years, and none of them have really come to fruition. So there's another one planned for this October. I'm not entirely sure if it's actually going to happen. We'll see about that. I don't know if I'll even be able to join this for October. I would like to, but it's more likely going to happen next October in 2025. That's when I have it penciled in, so that I'm like committed to it early enough that it's not going to change by the time we get to that point. So that's the first standalone on this list. Up next is sort of a series, but it's really just the remainder of a series, but only part of the remainder of that series. This is the Dune Saga, but basically just books 2 through 4. At some point in the future, I will be rereading Dune, because I really enjoyed it, but I do want to reread it before I do any of the sequels. I know a lot of what happens in Messiah, but that's besides the point. And I only plan to read through book 4, God Emperor of Dune. I don't plan to read books 5 and 6. I did jump on board Reen's read-along for the series back in June or February 2022, but I only jumped on for Dune. That was all I committed to, and when I read it and finished it and was pretty satisfied with the ending, I was like, okay, I'm glad I didn't commit to the sequels, because I don't really feel like reading the sequels right now. And that was how I felt. So like I said, whenever I eventually reread Dune, I will get to these next couple books, as well as God Emperor. No immediate plans for that, but it is one that I do want to read a little bit more of. The next standalone on this list, entry number 7, is Solenoid by a name that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce because I'm way too American to do that. A surreal novel that is a favorite amongst several friends of mine, and one that seems pretty interesting, but I've been told is quite dense and slow going because of, just how dense it is, really. I never intended to join for this one when it was a read along, and I basically resisted even acknowledging that the read along existed because I was at a point in time when people were bugging me about joining every read along under the sun, and I just got kind of ticked at it. So I eventually had to get to the point just like, stop adding me, and maybe I'll consider joining a read along every once in a while. This was one that I like kind of retroactively want to try because of how much a couple of my friends really like it. And I don't know, trying a solid surreal novel seems like something that I should scratch off my bucket list at some point, and I don't know of any other novels off the top of my head that would really fit that category, and since this one is a favorite of friends, it might as well be the one that I try. Also, modern literary fiction isn't horribly common in the world right now, so the fact that that is something that fits along those lines is pretty neat, so I might as well give it a chance even just on that line. But basically the complete opposite from modern literary fiction, let's go to epic fantasy and talk about a quick trilogy that I got huge FOMO for back in 2022. That is the Lycanius trilogy, so The Shadow of What Was Lost, An Echo of Things to Come, and then The Light of All That Falls, a trilogy with amazing covers. I love the simplicity of the artwork on this trilogy, but this happened in spring of 2022, I believe April through June, and it was a read-along that I really, really wanted to join. This was one of the ones that, like, I was sad that I could not make time to join it because of other obligations, but it is one that I still haven't gotten to nonetheless, but it is one that I have made decent priority on. It's one of the first epic fantasy series that I want to try shortly after I finish Faithful and the Fallen at some point in time. We'll see when that happens. But it is one that I really want to try. I know it's pretty mixed, like some people really like it, but then other people like really don't. I think the consensus is that the first book at least is pretty good, even to people who don't really like the trilogy as a whole, but I do want to give it a chance, and it is one that I'm sad I had to miss back in 2022. Next up, we're going to another standalone. This is another one that Reen will probably be pretty happy to see, but Kabi will be pretty happy to see it as well. Lord of Dark Places by Hal Bennett. This was also one that I never intended to join, and another one that really bothered me when people kept nagging me about trying to read it when I was not in the mood to be doing read-alongs at that point, especially after the previous time that some of the people that were nagging me about trying it was for the Bird Book. So, like, after the Bird Book's experience, which I did not like that book. I really liked the first part, but I did not like the rest of it. People nagging me about trying this, I'm like, I don't trust you people, I'm not reading it, and that was basically the end of story. In the time since, Reen has managed to convince me to, give it a shot, and since it is short, I do want to actually try to read it, but no promises on liking it, though, because if it's anything like what happened with the Bird Book, I won't like it, so I'm going into it rather tentatively. This might happen this October, it might be next October, I'm not entirely sure, but it's penciled in sooner rather than later, which I hope Reen and Kabi are pretty happy about. Next up, speaking of a fantasy series that I just mentioned the last time I talked about fantasy on this list, Faithful and the Fallen. This was a read-along that I joined for Malice, read through Malice, and I didn't love Malice, but I did want to continue reading the series with Valor, and then obviously both Ruin and Wrath to follow. I can't really say a whole lot about the series, it's just that I didn't love the first book for a few different reasons, and I don't know if I'll end up coming to love the series, but I do want to finish it nonetheless, most especially because Malice is not the thing that the series is loved for. It's usually Ruin and sort of Valor, I guess, that the series is loved for, so I want to see if things do actually eventually click into place for me with the series. I do want to give it another shot. I don't think the way that I read Malice was entirely fair, so like I said, I do want to give it a second chance. It is one that I started the read-along for back in June of 2023, and then I plan to continue Valor in August and September at the latest, basically, so around the time that the read-along was ending, and then I just never ended up having time. Last summer and fall for reading was super, super busy for me, so that's why that didn't happen. I've actually been having to fight the urge a lot the last month or two to just read Valor right now, even though I don't have the time, and it would absolutely upend a lot of other stuff that I've got going right now, but I've just had an urge to go back to the world and go back to the series all of a sudden. I think I've been waiting a little bit too long to return to it, to give it another chance, but yeah, that is a pretty high priority one on my list. I do want to get to it sooner rather than later and like actually finish it. And that way it's off my plate so that I can feel, a little bit more comfortable starting other big fantasy projects like the Lycania's trilogy, for example. But speaking of big, long undergoings, kind of similar to Solenoid, but also not, let's talk about number 3 on this list, Terra Nostra by Carlos Fuentes, another favorite of several of the people who really liked the Bird book, so another one that I should be pretty tentative going into, also because this one is magical realism, much like the Bird book was, but I feel like I'd be going into this one with a little bit better expectations, not least of which being that this one is dense and complex and takes forever to read. Apparently one of the last chapters, like the climactic chapter, so to speak, took several of my friends, even the fast readers, like a really long time to get through, despite not seeming like they should take that long just based off of how long the chapter is. It's a longer chapter, but like the book is so dense that it just took them forever. So knowing how slow I read, this could be a massive, massive undertaking, depending on how I try to do it. Maybe I'll eventually get around to it, and since it is split into like 3 parts, so to speak, between the old world, the new world, and the next world, maybe I'll get around to trying this and doing it over like 3 months. Maybe it'll be 6 months, doing 2 months per part or something. I don't know. Maybe it'll be 1 month per part and then taking a month in between. But it is one that I do want to give a shot, and that was also a read along that, like I said, I didn't actually intend to join because of people bugging me about it, but I have been worn down over time to wanting to give it a shot eventually, trademark. Next up, number 2, the final series on this list is one that is like actually insanely high priority that I'm really actually kind of upset that I don't have a planned time for yet. This is what my friends and I lovingly call the Cowboy Quartet, or the Lonesome Dove Saga. So starting with Dead Man's Walk, and then Comanche Moon, then, the titular Lonesome Dove itself, and then my mismatched copy of Streets of Laredo. I don't know, I'm not necessarily a huge Western person, but I also haven't read very much Western. There's just something about a Western vibe that I like, kind of enjoy, but it's a very particular thing. One of these days I do want to give this series a shot because like all my friends who read through it, especially in this chronological order, like really loved it. And of course Lonesome Dove is an absolutely legendary book. I don't think there's very many people who would be watching this video who have not heard of it at the very least. So it is one that I do want to give a hearty old shot to eventually. The series is a little bit longer. I always underestimate how long it is because the book bindings don't seem that big. It's just like, oh yeah, Lonesome Dove seems a little bit longer, but it's not like absurdly long. And then meanwhile, it's like 850 pages when it looks like in this binding it'd be like 500 or something. So whatever. The point is, I do really want to read the series. I'm upset that I don't have a time lined up like to give it a shot, but it is one that I want to try sooner than later. And then finally, the very last item on this list, number 1, is a standalone, and people who've been following, not necessarily my channel, but like my personal reading adventures, like on Discord, in a couple different servers, probably know what this book is. In fact, I may have started it at this point. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I'm starting it, right around the time that this video comes out. Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, and I also already have some bookmarks, in place for approximate locations that I like to get to in my daily readings, because I only really get to read over weekends, so Friday through Sunday, and then like also Mondays too, to an extent. And this book is probably going to be a really long, dense adventure, and I'm not planning on reading it quickly. In fact, I have it scheduled out for about 5 or so months, a really long time. Actually, probably like 5.5 months if I end up starting this in the middle of April. And it is one I've been excited about for quite a while, but, the read-along, the original read-along that happened for this book was back in April of 2023 it started, and I was able to get to a point over, like, February and March of 2023. It was like, oh yeah, I really want to join for that one. But then, like, things happened, and I'm like, I don't think I'm actually ready to try reading that right now, so, like, let's push it to, like, next April, next summer, or something like that. And then I got a few friends who decided that they would join me for that because they weren't going to be able to read it for the read along last year either. So now they're going to join me for this summer at some point. I'm starting it way sooner than I think any of those guys are starting it. They'll join eventually, but like I said, I intend to make this a very long and slow journey to give myself the space to really let it sink in, and also to let myself enjoy it perhaps a little bit easier. But that is like the top priority item on this list because it's the one that I'm reading right now. If I were to rank like the ones that are sort of priority, the ones that I think I'm going to read the soonest, it is Infinite Jest, Valor, and then I'm not sure actually. It might be Lord of Dark Places, might be the next one of these books from this list that I actually get to read, assuming I'm able to read Lord of Dark Places in October. But, you know, there you have it. Those are 10 books in series, well, 5 standalones and then 5 series that I either planned to join for a read along or decided after the fact that the FOMO was a bit too much and that I wanted to read them. So all of these I will circle back to at some point, maybe sooner than later for most of them. Who knows what will happen at this point, but obviously some of these are coming sooner than others, and I am excited for all of them nonetheless. If only I could read more than like 30, 35, or maybe 40 books a year. Like, it would be nice if I could read the 80 or 100 books that several of my friends are able to do, because it would make getting through all this stuff a little bit easier. But I'm also, you know, glad of the fact that I'm able to read really slowly and precisely, because it is why I'm able to do all the work that I'm able to do for Sun Eater, is because I'm so slow and conscientious of stuff. But, you know, that's besides the point. Thank you for watching this list. If you did, I will be back this Thursday with a discussion about Disquiet Gods with both Christopher Rocchio and his editor for the book, DJ Butler. And I hope you check that out if you're a fan of Sun Eater, because there's some really cool discussion that we were able to have in that video, and I'm looking forward to editing that actually very soon after I edit this video. So thank you guys again for watching. I'll be back in the next video.